A Navy SEAL on medical leave heard a sound, a cry for help. Not from a stranger,
This is
but
what
from an
happens
elderly
when you
mother being
disobey.
controlled and
Did
abused
you
inside a
think that there
billionaire's
would be no
mansion. He
consequences?
broke every rule, risking his entire career to rescue her from the daily psychological torment imposed by her own daughter. But what he uncovered reached far beyond cruelty. It exposed corruption, forged legal power, and a darkness hidden behind wealth. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Cold mist drifted across Seattle's waterfront, soft and silver, as dawn hesitated above the bay. Ethan Cole pushed himself harder along the damp path that curved beside Elliott Bay, his footfalls steady against the slick pavement. Rain clung to his black running shirt and emphasized the sculpted angular lines of his body, broad shoulders and lean muscle carved from years of discipline. He was 34, tall, with close-cropped brown hair and a short jawline beard that framed a mouth usually set in quiet restraint. His eyes, green like wet pines, carried a look most people couldn't name, a worn vigilance sharpened by places the average person would never survive. 3 weeks earlier, during fast rope training on a live fire exercise, his calf muscle tore. His commanding officer called it simple rest. For Ethan, rest was torture. He didn't know how to be still. He knew missions. He knew danger. He knew suffering. But he didn't know how to be the version of himself that wasn't necessary. And that uncertainty had started to eat him alive. Max ran at his side, matching every stride. Max was a 4-year-old German shepherd with deep amber eyes and a sleek black and tan coat, thick around the neck and shoulders like a lion's mane. Built strong and fast, Max's presence radiated confidence. He wasn't a pet, he was a partner. Max had been trained for service work with military personnel, but when his previous handler was injured and reassigned, Max was left without a purpose, until Ethan saw him at a rehabilitation kennel and recognized the same restless loneliness in the dog's gaze that he carried in his own heart. Max responded to soft whistles and subtle hand signals, running with the fluid determination of a wolf. At this hour, Seattle was still quiet. Ferries slept at the docks, water lapped gently against pylons, and a faint taste of salt mixed with rain. Ethan absorbed the silence. It made him feel less like he was drowning. His mind drifted toward memories he tried not to revisit. Sandstorms in Kandahar, the smell of diesel and gunpowder, the moment he held a teammate's vest drenched in blood while waiting for the medevac that arrived too late. Those memories had teeth. They always bit back at dawn. Max barked once, sharp and alert. Ethan halted, breath tight, scanning the surroundings. "Easy," he murmured. The dog lowered into a silent stance, ears angled toward the residential hill rising above the waterfront. A metallic sound cut through the mist. Clank. Not random, purposeful. Ethan's breath stopped. He knew that sound. Metal striking concrete. Clank. Then something else. A choked sound. Not loud, just wrong. A pained whimper of someone trying not to scream. Max's ears flattened. Ethan's pulse slowed into that old lethal rhythm, the shift from man to operator. The hill above them held rows of glass and steel mansions overlooking the bay. The one that caught Ethan's attention was a towering fortress of mirrored panels and angles, the Hale residence on Queen Anne Hill. And at its apex lived Victoria Hale. Ethan had never met her, but Seattle newspapers worshipped her. Victoria Hale, a 38-year-old self-made tech billionaire, founder of a global data encryption empire. The articles praised her for brilliance, discipline, and a chilling level of perfectionism. Photos showed a tall, slender woman with elegant porcelain skin, long, straight blonde hair, and steel-gray eyes that never quite smiled. Even in magazines, she radiated control. She resembled a statue, beautiful, cold, unreadable. But the sound coming from her property was not corporate power. It was fear. Clank. Ethan took 2 steps off the running path. Instinct overrode logic. Max followed, silent as a shadow. They slipped through a side alley where rainwater ran in thin threads down ivy-covered brick. Motion sensors swept the walls, but Ethan studied their sweep like a chess problem. He moved only between the blind spots, Max mirroring him, no command needed. "Stay low," Ethan whispered. Max's body nearly brushed the ground. From the alley, Ethan reached a gap where the massive property dropped toward a private terrace. Through a gap in trimmed hedges, Ethan saw the backyard, a white stone patio, polished like marble, an infinity pool reflecting the gray sky, and a stainless steel post rising from the ground. Connected to the post was a figure, a woman. Not a young woman, an older one. She was frail, trembling, wrapped in a thin patient gown that clung to her bones. Loose wisps of silver-white hair framed a narrow face lined with exhaustion. She looked like a bird with clipped wings. Her wrists were secured by soft medical restraints, not rope, not chains, but restraints meant to hide the cruelty behind the language of care. A small metal bell hung from a cord near her hand. Every time she failed to respond fast enough to commands, the bell was struck against the ground. Clank! The woman flinched with each blow, her body folding inward. Ethan's heart hit his ribs. Not a prisoner. Someone's mother. 4 seconds later, he saw the person holding the bell. Victoria Hale stepped into view, wearing a tailored, slate-gray athletic jacket, her blonde hair pulled back in a flawless low ponytail, her gaze cold and unblinking. Up close, she was more frighteningly composed than in photographs. Tall, thin, posture perfect, every gesture calculated. Her beauty felt engineered, not lived in. Again, Victoria said to the older woman, her voice calm and toneless. You must respond immediately when I cue you. This is for your progress. The older woman tried to speak, but only a strangled sound escaped. Victoria's lips barely twitched, annoyance disguised as patience. Mother, she said, as if the word itself inconvenienced her. You are wasting my time. Mother. Ethan's stomach twisted. This woman wasn't a patient. She was Victoria's mother, Eleanor. Hale. Newspapers once wrote that Eleanor had been a former classical pianist, kind, gentle, repeatedly described as grace in motion. Now she stood tied to a steel post like a malfunctioning machine Victoria wanted to reprogram. Clank! The bell hit the ground again, this time inches from Eleanor's bare feet. Max let out a silent rumble, teeth bared. Ethan caught Max's harness. His own thoughts ran like broken glass. He knew this technique, using a sound to condition obedience through fear. He had seen captors use similar methods in war zones. Victoria knelt, her voice low and dripping with irritation. You are safe here, Mother. If you would cooperate, none of this would be necessary. Safe. Ethan felt rage coil tight in his chest. Safety never sounded so much like a cage. Eleanor's lips trembled. Her whispered word was nearly lost. Please. Victoria straightened, emotionless. Discipline is mercy. Chaos is cruelty. Clank. Max jerked forward. Ethan held him back only by strength and sheer will. His internal war began. Duty versus instinct. If he breached that yard, the cameras would record everything. Victoria Hale would claim Eleanor had dementia, require supervision, that Ethan was the threat. Eleanor would be returned to her captor. The system would protect the abuser, just like all the times he had watched bureaucracies destroy lives overseas. Something inside Ethan snapped, not with heat, but with cold clarity. He pulled his phone from his waistband, lifted it just high enough to capture a perfect shot. Victoria Hale hitting the bell, Eleanor recoiling with pain, Max bristling at his side. 30 seconds. Enough to reveal systemized cruelty, enough to begin a mission. Ethan backed away into the mist, pulse steady, jaw clenched. He didn't feel like a man on medical leave. He felt like a seal on target. And targets don't leave innocent people behind. Rain hammered the empty parking lot of the small community clinic, each drop exploding against the asphalt like tiny detonations. Ethan shut the truck door without a slam, letting it latch silently. Max leapt out beside him, paws landing in puddles without hesitation. The German shepherd shook once, rain misting into the air, then positioned himself exactly at Ethan's left knee. Ethan carried Eleanor, wrapped in the wool blanket, her body weight shockingly light in his arms, as if she were made of twigs and memories instead of bone. Her head rested against his chest, white strands of hair sticking to his wet shirt. The woman was breathing, but barely. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender shampoo, an artificial comfort masking neglect. Max nudged the clinic's back door with his nose. Metal clicked softly from inside, followed by the door cracking open. A man stepped into the frame, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing wrinkled navy scrubs and battered sneakers. Dr. Miguel Santos filled the doorway like a fortress. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, skin a warm olive tone beneath the harsh fluorescent light, his black hair tied into a short, messy bun. A trimmed beard lined his square jaw, peppered with streaks of gray. He walked with a subtle stiffness in his left leg, the kind that could only come from past shrapnel or a bullet wound he never fully recovered from. His brown eyes locked onto Ethan with immediate recognition and an undercurrent of irritation. "Jesus, Cole," Miguel muttered, stepping aside quickly. His voice was rough sandpaper, deep and tired, the kind of tone that could command a battlefield or scold a grown man into obedience. "You didn't say it was a civilian." Ethan slipped inside, careful not to jostle Eleanor. "I said it was life or death. You also said, and I quote, 'Meet me at the back door and don't ask questions.'" Miguel flipped on a small exam light, not the overheads, keeping the room dim. He closed the door, then turned the deadbolt. "Next time, maybe include a geriatric hostage in the memo." Ethan laid Eleanor on a cushioned table. The blanket slid aside, revealing her thin arms marked by bruises in shapes that did not match accidental falls. Miguel's irritation evaporated. He stilled. The war medic in him awakened. He leaned closer, his expression sharpening into surgical focus. "Max," Ethan whispered. The dog sat near the door, ears rotating, scanning for threat. Miguel put on gloves. "Name?" "Eleanor." Ethan hesitated before adding quietly, "Hale." Miguel's head snapped up. "As in, Victoria Hale?" Ethan nodded. Miguel closed his eyes and cursed in Spanish, low, creative, and furious. "I've patched up idiots your whole career," Miguel growled, gently lifting Eleanor's eyelid to check pupillary response. "But stealing a billionaire's mother? That's a new level of suicidal." "She was being tortured." Ethan's voice was flat, heavy. Miguel paused only long enough for a tight exhale. "Vitals, weak pulse, shallow breathing, dehydration, possible sedative toxicity." He pressed gently near Eleanor's ribs. She whimpered. "And broken ribs!" His jaw clenched. He grabbed a rolling tray without needing to look and began placing tools, stethoscope, saline, tape, syringes with mechanical precision. "Get me a 500cc bag of saline from the fridge." Ethan moved to the storage cabinet and returned with a clear IV bag chilled by the small clinic fridge. Miguel hooked it to the stand and slid the needle into Eleanor's vein with practiced ease. "You do realize if she dies here, we both go to jail for kidnapping?" "She won't." Ethan's voice was steel. Miguel snorted. "Confidence. Cute." He reached for a chart. "Reasonable hiding place? Not so much." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Miguel's tone softened, just barely. "Talk. What happened?" Ethan kept his voice low to avoid agitating Eleanor. "Victoria's conditioning her mother using sound cues, ringing a bell, like Pavlov, but weaponized. Eleanor flinched every time. Pure reflex." Miguel froze. He looked up, eyes dark. "Conditioning trauma responses is torture. On the psychological scale, that's the deep end." Ethan rubbed the ache forming between his brows. "She said it was therapy, forced compliance, the way she talked about progress, like Eleanor was a malfunctioning machine." Miguel taped the IV tube and checked infusion rate. "And you filmed it?" Ethan nodded. Max shifted, emitting a quiet rumble, a warning. Someone approached the clinic. Miguel stiffened. He clicked off the lamp, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The shape behind the frosted glass was small, feminine, wearing a rain poncho. The handle turned. Miguel let out a slow breath. "That's April, night nurse. She's 21, halfway through nursing school, and..." The door opened. April Johnson stepped in, shaking rain off her jacket. She was petite, with warm dark skin and honey-brown eyes. Her curly hair was tied into a loose bun, and her voice was naturally gentle. She stopped when she saw Ethan, Max, and the fragile elderly woman on the table, her brows pulled together. "Dr. Santos?" Miguel spoke quickly. "We are treating a patient. You didn't see us." April blinked, assessing. She wasn't naive. Her gaze sharpened. She nodded once. "I didn't see anything. Need help?" "Get me warming blankets and ensure the hall cam stays off," Miguel replied. April disappeared, already moving like someone who knew how to follow orders. Miguel looked at Ethan again. "You're not thinking clearly. You're operating like you're still deployed." Ethan leaned closer, voice a whisper, sharpened by conviction. "When I was deployed, at least saving someone didn't make me the criminal." Miguel stopped cold, the weight of Ethan's words hitting. Something old and raw in him. Before med school, Miguel had lost his best friend during a mission in Fallujah because bureaucracy forced them to wait for permission to enter a hot zone. The friend bled out before approval came. Miguel swore he'd never wait again if a life was on the line. He now looked at Ethan as if seeing himself 10 years earlier. "All right," Miguel muttered. "She lives. We deal with fallout later." Without warning, Eleanor gasped, eyes snapping open. She thrashed weakly. "No! No more bells! Please, Victoria!" Ethan dropped beside her, gently placing his hand near hers, but not touching until she accepted contact. "Eleanor, you're safe. No bells. No more commands." She searched his face, pupils wide and frantic, then fixed on Max. The dog lowered his head and nudged her wrist gently with his aws. Something in her collapsed, not in fear, but relief. She whispered, "Are you real?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You're not going back." Miguel adjusted drip flow. "She'll stabilize, but we can't stay." April returned, handing blankets. She lowered her voice. "Is someone after her?" Miguel cast a glance at Ethan. "Someone powerful." Ethan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't answer. Max's fur rose slightly. Concern, danger. He could sense the shift in Ethan's body language. Miguel pressed an emergency prescription bag into Ethan's hand. Antibiotics, pain relievers, nutritional supplements. "She needs protection, and you need a place to disappear. You know what that means." Ethan nodded. An old reflex awakened in him. Evade, relocate, hide. "We'll go to a motel, somewhere no one looks twice." Miguel gripped Ethan's shoulder, fingers digging into muscle. "Cole, you saved her, but billionaires don't lose quietly." Outside, thunder shook the glass. Ethan lifted Eleanor again, Max guiding him toward the exit like a silent sentinel. This was no longer an improvised rescue. It was a war. Room 109 of the roadside motel clung to the edges of Seattle like a stubborn afterthought, a square of cracked concrete and weathered siding pressed against the roaring artery of Interstate 5. Inside, the air was thick with steam from the tiny shower, instant coffee, and the faint antiseptic smell left on Eleanor's blanket from the clinic. Ethan moved quietly, checking the blinds for gaps, counting passing footsteps outside. Max lay near the door, his front paws firmly planted, eyes half closed but never fully resting, every muscle prepared to launch. Eleanor slept now, curled beneath a faded motel quilt with tiny orange flowers, her breath steady but fragile. She clutched the wool blanket like a shield. The first night had been a storm inside her mind. She would wake suddenly, stiffen, and whisper, "No bells, no bells," until Ethan knelt beside her, and Max pressed his large head against her trembling hands. Today, her third day, she was stronger. The bruises along her wrists had softened from purple to brownish yellow. Her eyes, once unfocused, now held tiny sparks of awareness. When she stood for the first time that morning, she swayed like a sapling, but she stood. Ethan forced his body into stillness. He wanted action, a clear target, a plan with angles he could attack, anything except this waiting. Waiting was when the thoughts came back. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, fingers laced. Sweat dampened his shirt despite the cold. The nightmare had slammed into him harder last night. Sand instead of rain, smoke instead of motel dust. His breathing had refused to regulate. His body had believed it was drowning in heat and fear. Max sensed it first. Without a sound, the dog climbed onto the mattress, rested his enormous head against Ethan's chest, and breathed slow, heavy breaths. Ethan synced his lungs to Max's rhythm. Inhale, exhale, slow, controlled, alive. Now, Max patrolled the narrow carpet strip between the bathroom and the door, as though he owned it. A heavy thump from the room next door made Ethan tense, but Max didn't react beyond tilting an ear. Safe, for now. Eleanor sat up slowly and watched Ethan with cautious curiosity. Her long, silver hair, brushed by Ethan earlier, fell gently over her shoulders. She looked older than before, frail, yes, but her eyes held something now. Not fear, not confusion, determination. "Do you always move like that?" she asked softly. Ethan blinked at her. "Like what?" "Like every wall has teeth." She gave a faint smile, fragile but real. "And like you could kill the furniture if it attacked first." Max huffed as if offended. Ethan cracked the first smile he had allowed in days. "I was trained to expect threats." "And yet," Eleanor whispered, voice trembling but clear, "you saved me instead." He wanted to tell her he wasn't a hero, that he acted on instinct, on rage he barely understood. Instead, he asked, "Are you hungry?" She nodded. He helped her sit upright, propping pillows behind her. Ethan prepared oatmeal on the old microwave that wheezed like a dying animal. Max supervised closely, convinced that each spoonful required tactical assessment. While Eleanor ate small bites, Ethan scanned the news on his burner phone. No reports, no missing person alert, nothing suspicious. Too quiet. Victoria's silence was not relief, it was strategy. At 10:12 a.m., a sleek black SUV rolled into the motel parking lot. Ethan didn't see it directly. He noticed the shift in Max's posture. Max rose, tail low but stiff, ears forward, silent alert. Ethan crossed to the window, lifting the blinds just a fraction. A man stepped out of the SUV, mid-50s, tall, black suit tailored flawlessly. His build was lean and athletic, movements precise. His hair was silver at the temples, cut short and too tidy to be vanity. It was discipline. His posture radiated power without noise. He scanned the motel like a predator studying terrain. His face was unreadable, sharp cheekbones, thin lips, and eyes that looked at people the way a computer looked at data, processing, evaluating, discarding. He carried no umbrella despite the steady rain. Water beaded on his black coat, darkening the wool. Victoria Hale had just played her first card. Ethan recognized the type instantly. Fixer. Men like him didn't threaten. They erased. The man crossed the parking lot and spoke with the motel manager, a short woman named Gloria with red hair fading to gray. She rarely looked up from her crossword puzzle, but now her posture stiffened. Ethan could only see the fixer from behind, but the stillness in Gloria's face said everything. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Max growled low. Ethan touched the dog's flank. Steady, not yet. The man turned slightly, giving Ethan a clear view. Pale eyes, empty of heat but full of calculation. No malice, no hatred, just purpose. A man who believed people were chess pieces. The fixer moved room to room, checking with casual confidence. Room 107. Knock. Silence. Room 108. Knock. Silence. He was working down the line toward them. Eleanor saw Ethan stiffen. Instantly she slipped off the bed, body trembling but resolute. Should I hide? Ethan shook his head. No. You rest. I'll handle him. There was no fear in Eleanor's gaze, only a deep sadness. Victoria sent him. Ethan didn't deny it. Max positioned himself between Eleanor and the door, hackles raised. 3 knocks. Calm. Precise. Ethan opened the chain lock just enough to speak through the crack. Can I help you? The fixer's gaze flicked over Ethan, scanning height, weight, stance, injury patterns, calculating threat level. His voice was smooth and dry like polished steel. Good morning. I am looking for a missing family member. Elderly, fragile, very confused. No name, no details, carefully crafted message. Ethan's voice was steady. Haven't seen anyone like that. The fixer leaned slightly toward the gap. His cologne was subtle and expensive, cedar and citrus. People in this motel are transient, hard to track. Sometimes they don't know what's best for them. Ethan felt his blood ignite. Max growled again, a sound low enough to vibrate the air. The fixer's eyebrows lifted just slightly, taking note of the dog. Beautiful animal, he murmured. Well trained. Too well trained to belong here. Ethan closed the door with controlled firmness. We're done. Silence. Footsteps receded. Ethan waited until the SUV pulled out of the parking lot before he allowed himself to breathe fully. Eleanor exhaled slow, eyes glossy. Victoria won't stop. Neither will I, Ethan answered. Night fell again, bringing thunder that rattled the cheap windows. Max lay across the foot of Eleanor's bed like a wolf guarding the heart of a sleeping kingdom. Ethan sat by the door, back straight, knife tucked into his boot. This wasn't hiding anymore. It was preparing. Whatever Victoria sent next, money, lawyers, or hunters, Ethan would meet it. He didn't know why saving Eleanor mattered so much, only that it did. He looked at Max. The dog's calm, unwavering gaze spoke the truth. He wasn't alone in this mission. He had become a shield, and shields don't break. Pier 62 looked almost unreal at dusk. The wooden planks darkened with moisture, the water beneath reflecting streaks of orange and molten gold. A mild wind carried the tang of sea salt and faint diesel from boats drifting somewhere in the bay. Ethan stepped onto the pier with the cold precision of someone entering a battlefield. His shoulders squared, movements measured, face unreadable. He kept his breathing slow. Max walked at heel, every step a silent calculation, ears forward, tail low but steady. The German Shepherd looked carved from muscle and instinct, fur catching the dying sunlight like burnished bronze. The pier was alive with what looked like tourists, joggers, and fishermen, but Ethan knew better. Hidden among them were 5 NCIS field agents and 3 from Washington's Elder Protection Task Force. It had taken days to convince them. Agents don't like vigilantes, but evidence talks, and Ethan had given them evidence with blood on its edges. At the far end of the pier stood Special Agent Dana Brooks. She looked nothing like the Hollywood version of an investigator, short, compact, and muscular, dressed in an oversized navy windbreaker that fluttered against her thigh holster. Dana was in her early 40s, with espresso brown skin and tight braids pulled into a low knot. Her face was angular and sharp, framed by black-rimmed glasses. Her eyes held a piercing intelligence, and the fatigue of someone who had seen far too much paperwork hide far too many monsters. Years ago, Dana had worked a case involving a nursing home, elder neglect so severe that 2 patients died before a judge signed the order to intervene. It was the turning point that drove her to the Elder Protection Task Force. Dana didn't tolerate abusers. She annihilated them, legally. When she looked at Ethan, she didn't see a criminal. She saw a man who refused to wait for permission while someone suffered. "You know the plan," Dana murmured, voice firm but not unkind. "You'll stand here, deliver your line, stay calm, don't escalate, let her talk." "I can keep calm," Ethan said. Dana gave him a long, flat stare. "You're a SEAL who kidnapped a billionaire's mother from her estate. I don't believe a word of that sentence." Max huffed as if offended on his handler's behalf. Dana bent slightly and scratched behind his ear. "But the dog seems reliable. He can stay." Max accepted the gesture with dignified restraint. A gentleman. Ethan scanned the pier once more, his instincts mapping the exits. "We're exposed." "We're visible," Dana corrected. "Different." From behind a tourist couple, a tall man leaned over the rail, supposedly photographing seagulls. Ethan recognized him immediately. Agent Patrick Liu, slim frame, early 30s, buzz cut, clean-shaven, soft-spoken, his camera very much not a camera. Patrick was the calmest sniper Ethan had ever seen in federal service. The kind of man who could sit in stillness for hours without blinking, simply because his heart beat slower than most. Dana checked her watch. "She'll come." People like Victoria always think they're in control. As if summoned by the very word, black swept across the pier like a disturbance in the air. Victoria Hale approached. Victoria looked razor-crafted, tall, wearing a cream wool coat tailored to perfection, heels clicking against timber planks. Her blonde hair was tied in a smooth twist, catching the sunset with cold brilliance. She moved like someone who expected the world to shift out of her path, and it often did. Her face revealed no emotion. Not anger, not fear, only command. Beside her walked Clara Monroe, her personal aide. Clara wore black slacks, a slate sweater, and held a leather folio close to her chest. She looked younger than Victoria, mid-20s, with soft brown hair and delicate features. But behind Clara's hazel eyes lived exhaustion and a nervous tremor in her left hand that she tried to hide by gripping her folder tighter. Clara was not cruel, she was afraid of what Victoria could take from her. 2 men followed them, Victoria's private security. The first was Dale Riker, early 40s, bald, muscular, with a thick neck and a broken nose that had never healed straight. Tattoos snaked up his arm, disappearing into the collar of his coat. Dale radiated aggression, jaw clenching with impatience. The second guard was his opposite, Ryan McKee, tall and wiry, long face, close-cut blonde hair, eyes darting constantly. Ryan didn't want trouble. His nervous posture screamed the wish to be anywhere else. Victoria stopped less than 6 feet from Ethan. Her eyes swept him up and down before shifting to Eleanor's absence. "You have something that belongs to me," she said quietly. Ethan held her gaze, calm, controlled. "She's not property." Victoria's lips tilted upward, almost a smile, but not one meant for warmth. "My mother is medically incapacitated. Legally, that makes me her guardian. I decide her care. You," she flicked a glance at Max, then Ethan, "are a trespasser." Max didn't growl. He didn't need to. Dana Brooks lifted her phone slightly, a tiny red recording light covered by her thumb. Ethan kept his voice neutral. "You have evidence of that incapacity?" Victoria exhaled slowly, as though bored. "I don't need to justify myself. I have signatures, medical consent forms, a court order. Dana's eyebrow twitched. Bullseye. Victoria kept talking, unaware that every practiced syllable was building a noose. And that woman has no idea what's best for her. She is confused. She wanders. She forgets her own name. If you return her quietly, we can avoid escalation. The last word was laced with threat. Return her, Ethan repeated. Like an object? Victoria's nostrils flared. She is a burden. Do you understand what it costs me to manage her? The caregivers, the medical staff, the supervision. Dana stepped closer, unseen by Victoria. Ethan asked, voice quiet. And the bell? Victoria blinked. Then she made her mistake. Oh, please. She waved a dismissive hand. A behavioral tool, conditioning. If she's compliant, she doesn't need to be restrained. If she refuses, she suffers the consequence. A cause and effect system, perfectly efficient. Dana moved. Patrick shifted. Several tourists straightened. Victoria continued, unaware of the teeth closing around her. I invested in her care. She owes me cooperation. Ethan leaned in. She owes you nothing. Dale Riker began to step forward, shoulders coiled. Max moved like lightning, positioning himself between Ethan and Dale, muscles rippling, teeth bared, not barking, not snarling, just a deep, terrifying rumble that froze Dale mid-stride. Dana spoke, voice sharp. Victoria Hale, you are under arrest for elder abuse, unlawful confinement, financial exploitation, and medical coercion. The pause was absolute. Victoria's face lost its porcelain calm. Agents dropped covers, badges flashed, metal handcuffs snapped. Clara flinched when an agent approached her. Ethan caught her terrified eyes. She mouthed thank you. As Victoria was turned and cuffed, she didn't scream, didn't fight. She only stared at Ethan with chilling certainty. This isn't over. Ethan didn't respond. Max stood tall, unblinking, as if absorbing the threat and dissolving it into nothing. Dana nodded at him, voice softer now. You did good, Cole. But Ethan didn't feel victorious. He felt relieved. For Eleanor, for Max, for himself maybe. Only then did he allow the breath trapped in his chest to escape. He had chosen the right enemy. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and old paper, a scent that felt both stale and permanent, as if every judgment lingered in the air long after the people who received it were gone. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, slicing the space into alternating bars of light and shadow. Ethan stood near the back, hands clasped behind him, heels aligned like a soldier, even out of uniform. Max sat pressed against his right leg, posture still, ears alert. The dog's presence anchored Ethan the same way a seatbelt held a passenger during turbulence. Across the room sat Judge Margaret Ellison, a woman in her late 50s, tall and slender, with silver-streaked black hair pinned into a low bun. Her face held a regal shape, high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes that missed nothing. She had a reputation for being incorruptible, one of the rare judges who refused to be swayed by money, influence, or social status. Today she scanned documents through thin-rimmed glasses, the light catching the subtle lines at the corners of her eyes. Creases formed not from laughter, but from years of disappointment in human cruelty. Eleanor sat near the front with a social worker, her hair braided neatly, wearing a soft lavender sweater that complemented the warmth in her skin. She looked stronger now. Hope lived in the lift of her chin. Every so often she glanced over her shoulder toward Ethan, as if to confirm he was still there. When their eyes met, she smiled, a small smile, a real one. Victoria Hale sat with her attorney, a man named Jonathan Mercer, sharply dressed and sharply tempered. Mercer was mid-40s, clean-shaven, his dark brown hair slicked back, revealing a widow's peak. He had the tight, contained movements of someone used to winning. He radiated polished control, his cufflinks gleaming like tiny mirrors. He leaned toward Victoria and whispered instructions with the smooth cadence of someone accustomed to maneuvering judges and juries like chess pieces. Victoria stared straight ahead, posture perfect. Her blonde hair was now tied in a sleek ponytail, the simplicity of the style revealing the controlled tension in her jaw. She looked less like a billionaire and more like a statue of one, cold, unmoving. Her gray eyes flicked occasionally toward Ethan and Max, hatred simmering with the low voltage of a brewing storm. Judge Ellison tapped her pen. We are here to finalize temporary guardianship for Eleanor Hale pending the resolution of the criminal trial. Ethan stepped forward, standing witness. He spoke only when asked, trying to keep his tone neutral, but his heart hammered. Max, sensing the shift in Ethan's breathing, pressed gently against his leg. Mercer stood. Your Honor, we contest this entire proceeding. Ms. Hale suffers from progressive cognitive decline. Her daughter has managed her care with full legal authority. Judge Ellison lifted a single eyebrow. Barely perceptible, devastatingly effective. Managed her care? We have documented evidence of unlawful restraint, psychological conditioning, sedative misuse, and financial exploitation. Mercer cleared his throat. Misinterpretations. Dana Brooks stood smoothly from the witness bench. Dressed in a fitted charcoal blazer, she carried no papers. She didn't need them. Your Honor, we recovered audio of Ms. Victoria Hale describing her mother as a burden and discussing condition compliance. The language she used was not medical, it was ownership. Victoria's mask cracked for the first time. I was stabilizing her. She was deteriorating. Someone had to take control. She needed structure, or she would have... Eleanor's voice rose, trembling, but steady. I was not your project. Victoria froze. Eleanor pushed herself to her feet, leaning on a polished wooden cane. For the first time, the frailness fell away. She stood with dignity, like a woman reclaiming her body from someone who tried to edit it. Her voice quivered, a reed in wind, but it held. You wanted obedience, not care. Slowly she lifted her wrist, revealing faint scars from restraints. The entire room inhaled at once. Judge Ellison set down her pen, hands folded. Ms. Eleanor Hale, do you wish to choose your legal guardian? I do. Eleanor inhaled. I choose independence, with the assistance of a neutral third party. Dana leaned down and whispered something to Eleanor, smiling. Victoria snapped. He brainwashed you. That man, she stabbed a finger at Ethan, kidnapped you and manipulated you against me. Ethan didn't flinch. Max did. The dog rose, standing between Ethan and Victoria with silent resolve. Judge Ellison's gavel came down once. Enough. Victoria Hale, until your criminal hearing concludes, you are barred from contacting your mother directly or indirectly. You will remain under federal supervision. Eleanor Hale will be placed under temporary independent guardianship. Victoria surged to her feet, voice cracking. You can't take everything from me. Judge Ellison didn't raise her voice. No one took anything. You gave it away when you confused control with love. The word struck harder than a sentence. Victoria staggered. For a fraction of a second, her facade slipped. Beneath the perfection and polish, she was just a frightened child who never learned love without control. The bailiff led her away, tall, uniform, crisp. The sound of handcuffs clicked. Victoria's heels echoed against the marble floor like a fading command. Ethan exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Dana Brooks approached him, folder under her arm. She offered a hand. You did the hard part. We just wrapped the paperwork around it. Ethan shook her hand, grateful. Thank you. Dana shrugged, tired smirk tugging one corner of her mouth. Don't thank me. Thank the dog. He's the only member of this team who followed instructions. Max wagged his tail exactly once, proving he understood the compliment. Weeks passed. Autumn peeled back into early winter. The air grew sharper, crisp enough to sting lungs. Ethan visited Eleanor at her new residence, a lakeside elder care villa, not sterile, not restrictive. It smelled of lavender and warmth and fresh bread. Eleanor painted again, soft landscapes, strokes hesitant but sure. Staff adored her gentle humor. She told them stories about Max, always ending with, "He saved us both." Ethan returned to base to face consequences. The debrief room buzzed with fluorescent light, walls government beige. Captain Sloan, a seasoned officer with silver hair and square jaw, read Ethan's disciplinary file silently. His face remained impassive, carved from old granite. You disobeyed direct orders, broke federal law, risked national security by acting autonomously. Ethan stood at attention. Yes, sir. You also exposed a criminal network exploiting elder guardianship law, and you saved a civilian's life. Silence hung, taut as a bowstring. Sloan signed the reprimand. You're restricted to base for 30 days. No promotion consideration for a year. The pen clicked. Dismissed. And Cole, don't ever stop being the way you are. Outside, Max waited. Ball in mouth, tail sweeping arcs of joy across the walkway. Ethan laughed, ruffled Max's fur, and threw the ball. Max sprinted after it, unstoppable. Later, at Myrtle Edwards Park, a thin winter sun glowed over the water. Ethan jogged the shoreline, Max racing in wide loops, kicking up arcs of sand and sea spray. The world felt wide again, unsealed. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like a weapon waiting for a war. He just felt alive. Eleanor lifted a hand from a nearby bench, wrapped in a purple scarf. Ethan waved back, Max bounding toward her like a furry missile of joy. She laughed, really laughed, and scratched behind Max's ears. Ethan watched the horizon. Some missions were about extraction. Some were about elimination. This one had been about rescue and release, and that was enough. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as lightning or parted seas. Sometimes they appear quietly in the form of an exhausted soldier who refuses to walk away, or a trembling mother who finds the courage to reclaim her voice, or a loyal dog who teaches a damaged heart how to feel again. In a world obsessed with power and noise, God's work is often small, steady, and disguised as ordinary kindness. One open door, one honest choice, one moment where someone decides, I will not let darkness win today. If you are tired, or lost, or fighting a battle no one else can see, remember this. God does some of his greatest work through people who don't feel strong enough to be heroes. Courage is rarely loud. Sometimes it is just staying when you could leave, protecting someone fragile when you could look away, choosing compassion when the world demands convenience. And if you're reading this right now, maybe you are someone's quiet miracle waiting to happen. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and join us in spreading light in a tired world. May God bless you, protect your family, guide your steps, and place his hand gently on every burden you carry. Amen.